when routine stops asking permission. There is a point where discipline stops feeling admirable and starts feeling unsettling. People sense it before they understand it. You arrive early without checking the time. Your posture is the same on good days and bad. Your hands move before conversation warms up. Someone jokes about you being rigid. The air goes quiet. You feel the cold in your lungs and keep standing there anyway. Most people believe discipline is something you summon when you feel ready. They wait for alignment. They wait for energy. They wait for the right mood. That belief keeps them busy negotiating while nothing changes. You can see it in the way they start fast, talk loud, then slowly disappear. Not from weakness. From friction with themselves that never ends. You have lived that loop. Shoes by the door that gather dust. Alarms silenced with a dry mouth and heavy eyelids. Promises adjusted to protect comfort. Each time, the body learns that words don't bind it. Each time, the mind keeps its authority. Something in you notices this pattern and feels a quiet irritation behind the eyes. Older traditions noticed it too. Zen monasteries. Warrior houses. Figures like Miyamoto Musashi moved through days without checking how they felt about it. Not because they were inspired. Because their bodies belonged to a form. Knees fold to the mat without ceremony. The floor is cold. Breath steadies. No vote is taken. At some point, the question shifts. Not how to become disciplined, but what kind of person would find it strange not to act. Before reading further, write the habit you keep renegotiating. One line. No explanation, the person who always starts again. Let me tell you about someone like you. He wakes before the alarm, not early enough to be proud, just early enough to feel the dull weight behind the eyes. The room is quiet. Phone screen cold against his thumb. He sits on the edge of the bed with stiff fingers, telling himself today will be cleaner. The floor chills his feet. He stands anyway. No one is watching, which somehow makes it harder. He is capable. He reads. He plans. He talks about systems with confidence. At work, people nod when he speaks. At home, his shoes line up by the door each night. The belt is tied before the mind starts bargaining. Morning after morning, this small ceremony repeats. Some days it holds. Some days it collapses before noon. The pattern never shocks him anymore. That familiarity is the problem. When he trains, it looks serious at first. Shoulders tight. Breath shallow. The first weeks bring heat behind the eyes and a pulse that steadies just enough to feel control. Friends notice. They comment. You're on a streak. The attention sharpens him. Then one morning, rain hits the window. Muscles ache. The room feels heavier. He hesitates. 10 seconds stretch. The body waits for permission that doesn't come. Skipping once feels harmless. The next time arrives faster. The habit becomes a discussion. He hears himself negotiating aloud, voice low so it sounds reasonable. Just today. Just this week. His body listens. Knees don't fold. Shoes stay untouched. Later, someone asks if he's still training. He smiles and changes the subject. The silence that follows sits between them longer than expected. This is where most people believe they failed. They look for motivation like a missing tool. He does too. New playlists. New promises. New language. Each restart burns bright, then fades. The body learns another lesson, this can always be postponed. Dry mouth. Heavy eyelids. A familiar dull ache settles in the legs from not being used. Nothing dramatic happens. That's why it lasts. In older places, this pattern would look strange. In a temple, a monk with fever still sits briefly. The chain matters more than comfort. In a warrior house, footwork continues slowly when injured. Continuity is respected. The action shrinks but never disappears. The body is taught that absence is not an option. People around them don't praise this. They adjust their expectations instead. He senses this difference but hasn't crossed it. His discipline still belongs to his mood. Choice sits in front of every action like a toll gate. Each time he pays, it costs more. His friends don't say it, but they feel the inconsistency. Invitations come with conditions. Trust becomes cautious. He feels it when conversations end early. The problem isn't effort. It's that every morning still feels like a decision. And as long as it is, something else will always be chosen, where choice quietly erodes the day. The collapse rarely looks dramatic. It happens in small rooms, under soft light, with ordinary sounds. A kettle clicks off. A message buzzes. He stands there with tight shoulders, feeling the heat leave the water before it reaches the cup. Training time passes without ceremony. No rule was broken. Nothing announced itself as failure. That's why the damage goes unnoticed. Inside, a familiar conversation starts. It uses his own voice. Reasonable. Calm. It lists conditions. Weather. Sleep. Timing. He feels the pulse in his neck quicken, then settle. The body waits. 10 seconds become 20. The mind feels clever for finding flexibility. He steps away. The floor is still cold, but his feet don't touch it anymore. This negotiation repeats everywhere. At the desk, fingers hover before starting. In the evening, shoes stay on instead of being placed neatly. Each delay teaches the same lesson: action is optional. The body absorbs it faster than the mind. Muscles soften. Breath stays shallow. Posture loosens. People notice before he does. In places built on form, this conversation never happens. In a Zen hall, the bell rings. Bodies move. No one checks enthusiasm. The mat receives knees whether the night was long or short. In old training yards, the hour dictates movement. Weather is irrelevant. Mood has no seat at the table. The absence of choice feels harsh at first. Then it feels clean. He imagines that level of rigidity and feels resistance rise in his chest. Friends would comment. Schedules would clash. Invitations would thin out. The social cost appears immediately. He has learned to protect against that discomfort. Flexibility keeps him agreeable. It also keeps him stalled. One morning, he forces himself through anyway. The movement is slow. The ache in his legs is dull but persistent. Breath stutters, then finds rhythm. No one applauds. Later, a colleague asks him to adjust plans last minute. He says no without explanation. The room shifts slightly. Someone raises an eyebrow. The moment passes, but something lingers. That small refusal echoes louder than the workout. He feels it in his chest, a steadying pressure instead of the usual scatter. The body recognizes consistency when it appears, even briefly. The mind, however, resists the implication. If action becomes fixed, excuses lose their function. Comfort loses its leverage. He returns home with heat behind the eyes, not from effort alone, but from the friction of that realization. Discipline, handled this way, threatens more than habits. It threatens how others place you. It threatens how you escape. As long as choice remains in front of every action, this tension will keep returning, asking who is actually in control, the quiet war no one sees. Most mornings don't fail loudly. They thin out. He stands in the kitchen with a dry mouth, light creeping through the window, shoulders already tense. The plan is clear. The body knows the sequence. Still, the pause arrives. It always does. A small gap opens between intention and movement, and something rushes in to fill it. The negotiation never sounds desperate. It sounds intelligent. Adjust today. Protect energy. Be reasonable. He feels the weight shift in his hips as he leans against the counter. Breath stays shallow. Fingers tap once, then stop. The body is waiting for a verdict. This is the moment that decides more than the day. He has won this argument before. Many times. Each victory felt harmless. Each one trained the same reflex. When pressure appears, delay feels like relief. The relief fades quickly, replaced by a dull restlessness that sits behind the eyes all morning. By afternoon, he compensates with noise. Talking more. Planning more. Everyone sees the movement. No one sees the absence underneath. In old disciplines, this inner debate is treated like an enemy formation. Not dramatic. Just persistent. When it appears, the response is already decided. When fatigue shows up, intensity drops, not consistency. When rain falls, training moves indoors. When time breaks, the next available slot is taken immediately. The body is spared the argument. The mind loses its leverage. He experiments with this without ceremony. One morning, exhaustion hits hard. Legs heavy. Neck stiff. He shortens the session instead of canceling it. 5 minutes. Slow movement. Breath counting returns when the mind resists. The floor is cold. He kneels anyway. Nothing heroic happens. That's the point. Later, someone jokes about his predictability. "You're always the same." It's said lightly, but there's an edge. He notices it. Predictability unsettles people who rely on flexibility as cover. He shrugs, pulse steadying, and doesn't explain. The conversation moves on without him filling the space. The internal war doesn't disappear. It loses status. The voice still speaks, but it no longer holds command. The body begins to move before permission is granted. Hands wrap the handle the same way. Shoes are placed by the door without thought. The ritual repeats even when enthusiasm doesn't arrive. Especially then. This shift creates pressure elsewhere. Invitations arrive with disclaimers. "If you're free." He often isn't. Not because he's busy, but because the slot is already occupied. He feels the social friction tighten, subtle but real. This is the cost most people avoid. This is why the war stays hidden. As long as discipline depends on winning an argument, the argument will keep returning, patient and undefeated, the one way that leaves no space. The change doesn't arrive as inspiration. It arrives as subtraction. One morning, he removes the decision entirely. The hour is fixed. The action is fixed. There is no alternative prepared. When the alarm sounds, his hand moves before the thought finishes forming. The air is cold in his lungs. He stands. The body leads. At first, this feels mechanical. Almost insulting. He notices irritation in his chest, a tightening between the shoulders. The mind searches for creativity, for variation, for a way back in. There is none. The belt is tied the same way. Hands wrap the handle the same way. Knees fold to the mat without ceremony. The floor is cold, he kneels anyway. The repetition feels stark, but clean. People misunderstand this phase. They think rigidity is the goal. It isn't. The goal is silence. Without choice, the inner noise thins out. Breath finds a steady count. Pulse evens. The body stops bracing for debate. What remains is effort without commentary. It doesn't feel good. It feels settled. The world pushes back. A friend suggests a spontaneous change. He declines without explanation. The pause that follows is longer than usual. Someone laughs to soften it. He feels the social temperature drop slightly. This is new. His reliability has shifted from convenience to boundary. The difference unsettles people who expect access. At work, he blocks the same hour every day. Meetings are moved around it. At first, there are comments. Must be nice. He nods and returns to his screen. Fingers move. Shoulders stay relaxed. The routine holds. After a few weeks, the comments stop. The hour becomes assumed. This is how form spreads, quietly, through consistency that no longer asks to be approved. There are days when energy is low. He doesn't escalate. He scales. Slow repetitions. Short duration. Breath counts return when the mind resists. The action remains intact. The chain is unbroken. This prevents the familiar slide. The body learns a new lesson: presence is required, performance is optional. He notices something subtle. The urge to skip doesn't disappear, but it arrives weaker, less persuasive. The body now expects the movement. When it doesn't happen, something feels off, like leaving the house without shoes. Discomfort has inverted. Skipping feels strange. Showing up feels neutral. Socially, the friction stabilizes. People stop negotiating with him about that time. Invitations adjust. Some disappear. Others sharpen. Those who remain speak more directly. He feels the difference in conversations: fewer justifications, more facts. It's quieter. It suits him. This is the one way. Fixed time. Fixed action. No negotiation. Not because he is strong, but because there is nothing left to argue with. Keeping the chain when conditions break. The test doesn't come on good days. It comes when conditions fracture. Travel. Illness. A night cut short. He wakes with heavy eyelids and a dull ache in the legs, schedule bent out of shape. The familiar excuse presents itself cleanly: today doesn't count. He feels the dryness in his mouth, the pull to protect what little energy remains. The body waits. He doesn't push through. He preserves the chain. 5 minutes replace an hour. Movement slows. The breath catches, then steadies. Hands move through the same pattern, smaller, quieter. The floor is still cold. He kneels anyway. The action is reduced but intact. Nothing heroic. No audience. The absence of drama is deliberate. This prevents the most dangerous fracture, the gap. Once a gap appears, it invites explanation. Explanation invites delay. Delay becomes habit. He has lived that slope before. This time, the body learns something different: presence is non-negotiable, output is flexible. The lesson settles deeper than motivation ever did. Later that day, someone asks why he looks tired but calm. He shrugs. There's no story worth telling. The calm didn't come from rest. It came from continuity. The chain held. That's all. Older systems were built around this understanding. A monk with fever still sits briefly. A warrior with injury practices foot placement without force. The rule is simple: never let the form disappear. The moment form vanishes, choice returns. And choice, once invited back, takes control quickly. He starts preparing for disruptions in advance. Shoes laid out the night before travel. A shortened sequence memorized for tight mornings. When plans break, there is no scramble. When X happens, Y follows. No thinking. No negotiation. The body moves while the mind catches up. Social friction sharpens here. Friends expect flexibility during chaos. He doesn't offer it. Just this once doesn't land anymore. Some people bristle. Others adjust. Conversations change tone. He notices fewer apologies in his own speech. Less explaining. More stating. The shift feels subtle but firm. There are days when even 5 minutes feels heavy. He shows up anyway. The body resists less than expected. The pulse steadies faster. The mind stops dramatizing. The action completes itself. Afterward, he doesn't feel accomplished. He feels aligned. That difference matters. This is how discipline stops being fragile. Not through intensity, but through refusal to disappear. The chain becomes something the body protects automatically. Breaking it would require explanation, and explanations now feel unnecessary. The conditions will keep breaking. Schedules will bend. Energy will dip. That isn't the threat anymore. The real threat would be letting absence become acceptable again, when others begin to feel the shift. The change becomes visible before it is discussed. He walks into rooms with the same pace, regardless of the hour. Shoulders relaxed. Breath even. He doesn't scan for reactions. People notice anyway. Conversations adjust around him without being told to. The predictability creates a quiet pressure. Friends test the boundary without naming it. A late invitation. A casual suggestion to bend the routine. He declines with a steady voice, no apology attached. The silence that follows is brief but charged. Someone fills it with a joke. He smiles, pulse steadying, and lets it pass. The moment teaches more than an explanation would have. At work, expectations shift. Requests arrive earlier. Deadlines are stated clearly. The unspoken understanding settles in: he will not scramble. He will not negotiate last-minute chaos. This doesn't make him popular. It makes him reliable in a different way. People stop confusing access with trust. His body confirms the transition daily. The morning movement now happens before thought. Hands reach for the same objects. Feet find the floor without hesitation. When it doesn't happen, something feels off immediately. A faint irritation behind the eyes. A restlessness in the chest. Skipping no longer feels like relief. It feels like disorder. This inversion surprises him. Discipline was once the uncomfortable part. Now, absence is. The body has switched allegiances. It protects the routine the way it protects balance. When disrupted, it signals correction without drama. The mind follows instead of leading. Socially, the friction stabilizes into distance. Some relationships thin out. Others sharpen. People who remain stop asking why. They adjust. They speak more directly. Time together feels cleaner. There is less background noise. He feels it in his jaw unclenching during conversations, in the way silence no longer needs to be filled. There are moments of isolation. Evenings where the house is quiet and the schedule is already accounted for. He feels the weight of that choice in his shoulders. No distraction steps in to soften it. He sits with it. Breath slows. The sensation passes. The form holds. This is where many turn back. Not because the routine is hard, but because the identity is exposed. Discipline at this stage removes plausible deniability. You are no longer trying. You are simply doing. Others can see it. You can't hide behind intention anymore. He understands now why this level makes people uneasy. It reflects inconsistency without accusing it. It doesn't argue. It just stands there, steady, doing what it does. That quiet presence asks a question without words, and not everyone wants to answer it. The pressure doesn't come from effort anymore. It comes from being seen as someone who no longer, the moment discipline stops feeling chosen. There is no announcement when it locks in. No finish line. One morning, he notices his body moving without any sense of effort attached. The alarm sounds. Eyes open. Breath pulls in cold air. He stands. There is no internal voice commenting on it. The absence of commentary is what marks the change. The routine no longer feels like something he maintains. It feels like something that would be strange to violate. On days when the sequence is delayed, his skin feels slightly wrong, like wearing clothes inside out. A low irritation builds behind the eyes until the form is restored. Once it is, the sensation dissolves. The body has learned its order. He doesn't feel proud of this. Pride would require comparison. This state doesn't look outward. It simply repeats. Hands wrap the same way. Movements land with familiar weight. Breath settles into its count. The floor is cold. Knees meet it without resistance. The act contains no narrative about progress. Others interact with him differently now. Not with admiration. With assumption. They assume he will be where he says he will be. They assume he won't adjust for convenience. They stop checking. This is the final shift. Discipline has moved from performance to expectation. That expectation holds him more firmly than motivation ever did. There are still hard days. The body tightens. Energy dips. He scales without emotion. Shorter. Slower. Present. The chain remains intact. The mind no longer interprets this as compromise. It recognizes it as preservation. That recognition removes tension. He realizes something unsettling in its simplicity. Discipline did not make him exceptional. It made him legible. His actions line up the same way every day. There are fewer explanations to offer. Fewer stories to manage. This clarity creates space, but it also removes escape routes. When asked how he stays consistent, he gives no answer that satisfies. There is nothing to teach. Nothing to package. The truth feels almost impolite. There is no decision happening anymore. The question itself assumes a struggle that no longer exists. This is where identity completes its turn. Discipline is no longer an act repeated daily. It is the shape his days fall into. To act otherwise would require justification. And justification now feels heavier than effort ever did. He understands why most people never reach this point. It costs flexibility. It costs social ease. It costs the comfort of being unfinished. In exchange, it offers something quieter. Order without force. Movement without debate. Nothing about this looks dramatic from the outside. From the inside, it feels final. Not because it ends, but because it no longer needs to begin, the day you stop arguing with yourself. Discipline is not something you return to each morning. It is something that remains when the conversation disappears. When the body moves without asking. When the hour arrives and nothing inside you tries to delay it. This is not willpower. Willpower still negotiates. This is order. At this stage, effort feels smaller than explanation. You no longer need stories to justify why you act the same way every day. The form holds you. The repetition holds you. The absence of debate creates a quiet stability that doesn't announce itself. It simply persists. This is why discipline as identity feels cold to people watching from the outside. There is no visible struggle. No visible reward. Just a man who stands when it's time to stand, moves when it's time to move, and stops when the sequence ends. No adjustment for mood. No appeal for understanding. The strongest person is not the one who pushes hardest. It is the one who no longer needs to push at all. Strength here looks like predictability. Like being where you said you would be. Like not needing to explain yourself. This is the cost. You lose flexibility. You lose excuses. You lose the comfort of feeling like you're still deciding who you are. In return, you gain something quieter. You gain a life that moves without friction. If discipline is still something you do, it can still leave you. If it has become who you are, leaving it would feel like a fracture. That is the difference. Comment your commitment. One sentence. No explanation. No context. Just the action you will no longer negotiate.